At Odds and Ends by Corndog_Patrol and For the Wolfie. Chapter 21. Preparation. Toshinori hadn't been able to stay long after dinner, but had left them a promise to contact them closer to Overhaul's soiree to better plan the night. They waved him goodbye, but before they could spare themselves, Hizashi turned to Shouta. Want to get some air? Sure. Shouta didn't seem too confident in the answer, but when Hizashi offered his hand, he took it. Hizashi smiled and gently tugged him outside, leading him towards a gazebo behind the place. Nimue had lit the gas lamps outside, meaning they had a runway of lights leading them through the darkness, and it wasn't long until the two was settled in the ivory statue, surrounded by the Rispera and Hydrates. Thank you for telling him, Hizashi said softly, ensuring there was some distance between them on the seat. Shouta had been forced close to his side all night. I know it must have been hard for you to take that leap, but you won't regret it. If we need Backbuck, he'll come through for us. And for Eri. Shouta nodded quietly, his eyes cast downward. Hisashi followed his pupils to find Toshinori's parenting guide cradled in the hybrid's lap. Warmth filled through him at the sight. He remembered how constantly that book had been throughout his childhood, especially when he was a teenager. There had been so many moments when he and Toshinori had been in the middle of something, like a dinner or an argument, and the book had come out as the adult had stumbled on what to do for the situation. Toshinori had never needed the book to be a good father, but Hisashi agreed that it typically had relevant advice. Now the mantle has been passed to Shouta, and Hisashi knew he'd be an amazing father as soon as they got his daughter back. Your acting was good too, Hisashi pointed out, almost afraid of the silence. It had felt so natural to hold Shota's hand and to encourage him like a doting lover. Loving Shota Aizawa was such an easy thing to do. I was worried he'd see through and think you were only faking to get Eri back. Shota finally looked at him, but he wasn't smiling. When he spoke, he sounded coarse and determined. How did he save you? Hisashi tilted his head, uncertain about what he meant. I mean, he adopted me and gave me a home? The hybrid shook his head. Your blood types are different. He's a hybrid, so the silver bullet wound healed. But that doesn't explain how you didn't go feral. I did go feral, Hisashi quickly reminded him. Okay, it doesn't explain how you didn't go permanently feral. Hisashi scratched the back of his head. He'd never really liked to talk about it with anyone, but he supposed it was only fair to come clean. After all, Shouta had told Toshinori the truth, so it made sense that Hisashi should do the same. You know how vampire healing works, right? When we're wounded, our body draws from the blood we've consumed and burns through it like a fuel. If a vampire doesn't drink blood, their cells die out, but one who is well fed can heal most wounds without any consequence. Hisashi subconsciously scratched at his chest, where the two bullet scars were hidden beneath. A vampire goes feral if they drink incompatible blood through, like I did, with Toshinori, and like... He swallowed, but didn't finish his final example. Hisashi's father had been feral that night of the attack. Shouta was quiet, and let Hisashi explain. Even though the Slayer must have already had an extensive knowledge of all this. Only hybrid blood can heal a civil wound. When Toshinori found me, a child lying in a pool of their own blood, he didn't even consider the compatibility factor. His blood type was different. So although it healed my wound, it distorted my mentality. Even though I'd just eaten, all I could think about was drinking more. Hisashi shuddered, and had to pause in his story at the mere memory of going feral. It had only been brief, but it scared him to remember those moments, to remember his thoughts, and to know they belonged to him. The hunger had been mind-numbing. He hadn't cared about Toshinori's life. He'd just been cattle, meant to feed him. He'd been driven by an urge to kill other vampires too, to have the entire human species to himself. He'd been talking. He'd been taking too much from the Slayer's veins, and when the man had tried to pull him away from his arm, Hisashi had hissed and clawed him, desperate for more. All the while his body had sizzled as the gaping wound in his chest had healed, to the point where only a scar had remained. Hisashi's teeth had been pried from the hot flesh, and his face had been pressed into the carpet. Toshinori had pinned him in place, and the hunger had returned tenfold. It had been agony. A vampire's body burns through its blood recess as it heals. Hisashi continued, voice soft. Thankfully, a feral vampire is only feral while the incompleted blood is in their system. The energy required to heal my bullet wound ate up a good amount of Toshinori's blood. But after realizing what was happening, he came up with a plan. He administered small cuts across my body. They instantly healed, but each one used a little bit of stored energy until... So, a vampire is like a furnace? Shouta said, interrupting Hisashi's thoughts. While blood is the firewood. Hisashi nodded at the comparison. If you use the wrong wood, then you can't take it out once it's cinders, so you just have to wait for it to be consumed by the flame until there's nothing left. However, to keep the fire burning, you need to replace it with better wood near the end. Shouta nodded in understanding. By the time, I imagine, the doctors were able to reach you and give you compatible blood? Hisashi nodded. The wrong blood needs to be burned by the body healing, and then replaced with the correct type of blood. It's complicated. There was silence after that, and they both stood, leaning against the ivory pillows of the structure. The flowers filled the scene with represented colors and the scent of life. Hisashi felt so vulnerable in that moment, looking down at his shoes. He never told that to anyone before, in fear of what the memories would awaken. It turned out, all they did was fill him with dread and relief. There was a dread in remembering what it felt like to slip away, to become nothing but a pulling beast of hunger, but also relief in Shota's reaction. The man understood All Might's sacrifice, but also his desperation. Another Slayer might have just let Hisashi die there, an unfortunate casualty. Another might have just killed him as soon as he turned feral, believing that they've tried and that Hisashi had simply failed the blood type lottery. All Might had perceived and persevered, and that was the only reason Hisashi was here today, leaning against some painted polygra, against the sky of Wisra and a sea of hydras, with Shouta Aizawa across from him. No, that wasn't the case, for Shouta pulled away from the other side. For a strangled moment, Hisashi thought he was leaving him, but instead, the man moved to Hisashi's side. He leaned on the same pillar as Hisashi, so close that their forearms brushed together whenever they breathed. Thank you for telling me, Shouta said gently. Hisashi offered him a half smile, although his eyes felt strangely damp. Thank you for telling Toshinori. They stood like that for a time without speaking, just taking comfort in each other's company, as they looked over the side of the lake and the stone angel that presented over the scene. 3 days remaining. Hisashi had constructed a tight schedule for Shouta that involved an uncanny mixture of skills, some related to dinner etiquette, some to conversational skills. Shouta was terrible at those, while others were related to training drills and exercises. Shouta was genuinely surprised to learn what an amazing fighter Hisashi was. He wasn't on the same level as a Slayer, but it was obvious in the way he moved that he had naturally quick reflexes, and had a style reminiscing of All Might's, clearly disclosing his trainer's identity. While they fleshed out Plan A, the servants of the Yamada mayor worked on Plan B. They set up a time frame and an empty point if Shouta and Hisashi weren't out with Eri before midnight. They break in, no matter the consequences, with All Might leading the charge. That day, however, they had a visitor. The knocker echoed through the mayor, but there was a sense of expectation as Tensei wheeled to answer it, since they all had been expecting the eventual return. The tailor, Hakamada, stood framed by the door, with a large black bag on each side. "Welcome back," Tensei said as he wheeled to the side, a warm smile in place as he let him in, shutting the repaired door behind him. "I'm sorry that took me so long," the man said, curtly, although he didn't set the bag down just yet. "You can't rush perfection." He looked up at the second floor banister where Shouta stood, having been drawn by the sound of the knocker as well. "Are you ready to try on some clothes?" Shouta simply nodded, but he hadn't been the only one drawn by the sound of the guests. "Hakamada!" Hizashi was as bright as ever as he walked into the entrance room, a bounce in his step. He looked rather casual today, with his hair down, the top button of his white shirt hanging undone, and the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. However, what really caught the attention of the guest was surely the stain on the front. "What's that?" asked the tailor, his voice aghast. Hisashi looked genuinely surprised until he noticed the stain himself and laughed sheepishly. "I was helping Overo make some stones for your visit. They should be ready soon." Now feeling more self-conscious, Hisashi rolled his sleeves down and did some of the buttons. While Hamagatara looked pale at the dirty shirt, Shouta was resisting the strong urge to smile. Hisashi had even unnoticed batter on his face, but by the time Shouta reached the lower floor, the blonde had wiped it away. Not that the vampire slayer was disappointed. "Well, I have the clothes you ordered. Are you planning to attend Overhaul Solaire, Mr. Yamada?" "Shouta and I will be attending," Hisashi said, although his smile didn't seem as bright, even when the slayer stood by his side. "They know," Shouta said simply. The comment, directed at Hakamada, although it earned a curious glance from Hisashi. The tailor appeared to physically relax. "They're aware you're an ex-vampire slayer." He frowned. "I'm not an ex-slayer. I just had my license temporarily revoked." Hakamada glanced around at the faces of Hisashi and Sensei, as if to check whether they were surprised by the news. "Very well. I remove the time limit on your investigation, but if something mysterious occurs, I'll be sure to alert the authorities. Shall we shoot you up? I have just the outfit for the occasion." Hisashi looked confused by the man's composure, but relaxed suddenly, as if he'd recalled something. When his eyes met Shota's, he smiled sheepishly. "I forgot you told me Hakamada knew." Shouta nodded, but was surprised when Hisashi reached forward and took his hand, giving it a few squeezes before stiffening. His face was a brilliant red, and he was quick to pull away. "Sorry," Hisashi spluttered. "I guess I kinda got used to it. Well, Toshinori was here." The feeling of Hisashi's warmth lingered on his skin. His own cheeks felt heated as he glanced away. "It's fine. I mean..." For a moment, he nearly told Hisashi it was okay, and that they could hold hands if he wanted to. But then he remembered they weren't actually together. The act was unnecessary around Best Genus anyways. "Just the force of habit," Shouta said instead, offering Hisashi an excuse. "Exactly," he agreed, twiddling his thumbs. "Are you two coming?" called Hakamada from the main living room. The duo nearly jumped out of their skins, earning a frown from Tensei before they followed in Best Genus's footsteps. The tailor was already unpacking his bags, and even the fashion erupt, Shouta Aizawa could tell the clothes were being organized, from the most basic to the most resplendent. He was left gawing at the fanciest one, and he wondered if Tensei had chosen it as a joke. There was no way it would suit someone like him. "I imagine this will be best for attending the Solaire," Best Genus said when he noticed his gaze. The base was simple enough, with a crisp white blouse with large cuffs and a sharp collar, and a pair of dark pants that slimmed between the knees. However, atop the outfit was one of the fanciest vests Shouta has ever seen. The fabric was black, but embroidered on the sleek surface was illusioned red patterns, all clearly done by hand. The front was adorned with thick golden buttons, and sitting beside it was a sleek top hat. I suppose, since it is of the most importance, Hakamata drawled, we will check the fit of this one first. He ushered Shouta to the same standing stool he had been on last time, and a wheel of measuring tape emerged from his sleeve. Strip. Shouta hesitated, glancing between Hizashi and Hakamata. Although the reaction was due to the tailor's presence, Hizashi misunderstood and smiled sheepishly. Sorry, call me when you're dressed up. He hurried out like a shy teenager, and Shouta had to resist the urge to call out after him that they have already seen each other naked. You can keep the underwear on, Hakamata clarified, his hawk-like eyes focusing on Shota's face. Part of my job is to check for extra bites, he said more quietly. Everything's fine, Shouta said, but he did as requested. However, the tailor didn't say anything as he started measuring his body, despite already having his measurements from the first visit. Shouta understood why he did this. However, it would be important for someone like Hakamata to keep track of the donor's measurements to ensure they weren't being malnourished. He even measured the bite marks again to ensure no one else had bitten him. Hakamata hummed, although his sound seemed content, as he flipped the measuring tape away. Should I be concerned about the solaire? Questioned the tailor as he collected the different components of the outfit to help Shouta dress. Talk to Sensei about it, Shouta instantly said, taking the pressure off him. If the butler felt like he could trust the tailor with knowledge of the plan, then he'd have faith. Hakamata hummed again, less content, but he didn't press it. Shouta was pulled into the formal outfit, but was surprised by how comfortable it was, just as the tailor had promised it would be. Last component. The tailor held up a gray wooden coat and a sleek top hat. The prior was nice and snug, warming him to his core, but the hat refused to sit properly, even after Best forcefully combed and tied his hair. It felt like he was trying to balance a stack of books on his head. Shouta looked in the mirror, but although the outfit was stunning, the hat made him look like a chimney. Okay, Mr. Yamada, you may enter. The door opened, and Hizashi returned, eyes instantly meeting Shota's. The shift in his expression was obvious, but maybe because he was studying it so carefully. His bright green eyes widened in surprise, and his cheeks lit up with a soft, rosy red. A small gasp parted his lips, and even his silly mustache tilted with the movement and looked almost adorable. Shouta glanced away, his cheeks feeling warm. It was suddenly too hot for the thick coat, and he was quick to remove it, to avoid sweating on his brand new clothes. Hizashi, however, didn't hesitate to move in front of him so he could smooth down the front of the waistcoat. That looks silly on you, Hizashi said playfully, leaning up to tilt it a little, and even tried pulling Shota's hair out of the tight ponytail to see if it looked better. It feels silly, Shouta agreed, his voice sounding far lower than he intended. Hizashi removed it and offered it to Hakamata. Did you bring a Homburg? The tailor's eyes narrowed with distaste. That would be too casual for such an affair. I'll wear a top hat myself, Hizashi persisted. So I don't think anyone would mind if a professional donor is wearing a hat that's a little more casual, especially considering the outfits they parade in. Hakamata stood like a statue. Shouta looked between the two vampires, uncertain if Hizashi knew how critical his comment was. After all, the usual outfits were the tailor's specialty. The silence held for what felt like hours, only ended when Best laughed. It wasn't a loud trolling, just the smallest of chuckles, but it eases the tension nonetheless. And the tailor turned and picked up a hat that had been further down the line of clothes. Hizashi took it and placed it on Shota's head, moving it around until it sat correctly. Fingers brushed through his hair, and the words the blonde had told him before All Might's visit refused to give him peace. I won't be acting. Although he doubted Hisashi's taste, he didn't doubt his feelings, especially at times like this. Hisashi was looking at him with stars in his eyes, like he was everything he'd ever wished for. The guilt came again, but with it was something softer. Maybe he wanted to be something Hisashi wished for. There, the blonde said, softly, with a dazzling smile. I think you'll be acceptable. Even Hakamata looked soft, if a bit awkward. Hisashi's feelings were certainly obvious. I suppose that'll be fine, sighed the tailor. Did you wish for my help with the rest of the outfits? I trust your judgment. Hisashi took another step back and turned his smile to Best Genius. Come, I can sort out the payments in my office. Hakamata nodded, but took something from his jacket and offered it to Shouta. Miss Fukugado told me to give you this. Please write her a response by the time I leave. I left a quill, ink, paper, and envelope on the table for you to use. Thank you, Shouta said as he took it, although he waited until Hakamata and Hisashi were gone before he opened it. Dear Shouta, sorry I couldn't come in person. Best Genius was kind enough to deliver this for me. Please send me a letter to let me know whether you've managed to be successful. I'm ready to knock down Overhaul's front door myself if we really need to. Best regards, Emi Fukugado. Shota's eye twitched at the use of their actual names, but he couldn't resist a slight tug on his lips. He wasted no time in sitting down at the table to write a reply, although it took him a few minutes to figure out what he needed to say. He kept it short and sweet, confirming that he had gained entry into the mayor and that the plan would move ahead. For a moment, he wondered about including the knowledge of Hisashi's assistance before deciding against it. The less Hisashi was incriminated, the better. He folded up the paper and surveyed the rest of the clothes while he waited for the return of the two vampires. Guilt continued to pester him at the sight of the beautiful tailored suits he'd never get to wear, although he'd try to make himself feel better by insisting Hisashi would just get another donor and give the best suits to them instead. He was interrupted when Hisashi returned with Best Genius close behind. When the Yamada looked at him, he smiled eagerly. Remind me to teach you how to dance, he said softly. Shouta nodded, but had to put his attention away from Hisashi's smile so he could give the letter to Best Genius. Thank you. He nodded and tucked the envelope into his jacket. I'll give her your reply. Tensei Nomori stepped inside the room to gather the clothes and carry them to Shota's room. When he offered to help, they instantly shot down the request and continued without him. Instead, he and Hisashi guided Best Genius to the entrance and saw him off. He nodded firstly at Hisashi. Thank you for your Patreon. Then he turned to Shouta with a sense of resolution, and he instantly knew Hisashi had told him about Eri. I hope you succeed. Overhaul must be stopped. If you need support, I'll be on standby. With that said, Hakamata turned and left, leaving Hisashi and Shouta standing in the doorway, watching him go. I think this is finally him, Aizawa finally being like, maybe I do like him. But he hasn't hit the full realization yet. I don't think he has. I don't think it's fully hit him, right? I think it's just slowly. The floodgates are opening, but the flood has not yet to happen. Also, I love this chapter so much. This chapter is such a sweet chapter because, obviously, right, you have Aizawa having more cutesy moments with Hisashi, but Aizawa, there's moments in Aizawa that I love in this chapter, which is basically just like, the first thing is the fact that he was almost going to tell Hisashi that it's okay to hold his hand. And then he remembered, right, the relationship thing, that's just an act. We don't need to keep up the act anymore. Which is like, interesting. Shouta, you kind of stopped viewing it as an act for a second there, buddy. Buddy, you want to share something with the class? You want to share? Second thing is, I find the whole Yamada being like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna leave. I'll be right back when you're done changing. And, Aizawa in his mind is just like, I've seen you naked. You've seen me naked. Why are we doing this? Like, why? I love that. I love that. And I love in the end when, or not at the end, but like towards the end, when Aizawa feels the guilt, obviously, because he's like, I feel guilty. And then he's just like, obviously, Hisashi cares about him and his feelings are real. And then he's like, wait, hold up. I want him to want me. Which is like, you want him to want you. Do you want him? It's giving feelings. It's giving, you want to share something with the class? Also, I have been informed the other day that my friend, and by the other day, I mean yesterday, that my friend listens to this podcast, or Podfic. I don't know why I said podcast. And to that I say, hi. I did not know that. Like, I knew you listened to Podfics, but like, I don't know why it didn't cross my mind that my Podfics were in the table. I don't know why I thought like my Podfics were at the table, you would never listen. And then I find out that you're listening to this one. Hi. Hello. Yeah, hi. I don't even know if you're listening to the end parts, but hello, I was not informed of this. I was not aware till, yesterday, clearly. So, yeah. Anyways, I think that's all the notes I have for today. This was a very easygoing chapter. So yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.